Seminar, which we've said is all about the powerhouse economies. Now, I think all of that needs a little bit of explanation. First of all, seminar, it sounds dreadfully academic, doesn't it? It sounds like we're all sort of seated in some college campus, but it's not going to be like that. I don't want it to be dry. I want it to be thoroughly engaging and interactive, and we're going to have 5 separate sessions on these powerhouse economies, and I'll explain that phrase in a second too. But in the course of each of the 5 discussions and debates, we very much want your thoughts and contributions as well, because I'm sure within this room there's a whole lot of experience about running travel businesses and tour operations in all of the countries, from all of the countries that we're going to be talking about. So we want to draw on your thoughts, questions and experience as well. So there are roving microphones, and we'll be turning to you for feedback and thoughts throughout the session. Now, these powerhouse economies, we're sort of slightly shying away from the dread acronym BRICS, but in the end it is about those 5 countries. Not that necessarily we should regard, I think, the notion of Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa as the story of the powerful emerging economies. Clearly other countries, you know, just thinking of countries from Turkey to Mexico to Nigeria to Vietnam, you know, there are a huge number now of powerful emerging economies, but the fact is these 5 are arguably the biggest of the emerging economies. They've certainly attracted a lot of attention, if only because good old Jim O'Neill at Goldman Sachs coined this phrase, the BRICS, which originally of course was the 4 BRIC, and then South Africa, the S got added as well. So we're going to do it as 5 separate seminar sessions. We're starting off with Brazil, and I'm hoping and trusting that all of you are here because you are interested in Brazil. If Brazil isn't the country you particularly wanted to attend to, then don't worry, we're getting to the others very quickly afterwards. I'm sort of assuming you know who I am because I do quite a lot of work at WTM, but if you don't, I'm Stephen Sacker. I'm the host of Hard Talk on the BBC World News channel. Do quite a few other things for the BBC as well. A veteran sort of news reporter and correspondent before I became an interrogator. I'll do a little bit of interrogating today, but all in the best possible taste. I won't get the thumb screws out or anything like that. And we have got a lot to get through with 5 different geographical areas, regions, countries to deal with. So without more ado, I'm going to invite onto the stage 2 key speakers who will introduce the themes and some of the thoughts behind all of this, because I should say at the outset, this event has been sort of put together by the European Tour Operators Association and the European Travel Commission, who've done an awful lot of work assessing the current reality of these different markets and also looking at the potential that is offered by these powerhouse economic stories as well. So let me begin by inviting onto the stage the CEO of the European Tour Operators Association, Tom Jenkins. He can give you some context and we'll take it from there. But Tom, off you go.
Thank you, Stephen. I think my role today is very brief. I ought to say a few words as to what we do at the European Tour Operators Association. We are an association of those tour operators that sell Europe largely as a unitary destination in origin markets. And these origin markets traditionally were places such as North America, Australia and Japan, but increasingly they're starting to be those countries which we've just referred to by that unhelpful acronym, BRICS. Now, these are obviously the subject of today's discussion, but I think it's really up to me to stress that what is, I hope, going to become very apparent in the discussion today is that these countries have very little in common with one another. They're all individual countries, and above all, the people that we're selling to in those countries are individuals in those countries. And generalizing in the way in which one tends to about a market tends to be very damaging. Generalizing about a group of markets is perhaps even more damaging. So I hope today what we'll be hearing is how very different these places are. They are only similar perhaps in the fact that they form part of the dreams of the origin market, the destinations in Europe. And these dreams tend to be very, very far from reality. So One thing I would like to stress also is that if anybody wants to have any of the information we screened today, they should leave their business cards at the exit. We'll be happy to send any information that we show today out to them. And furthermore, one of the things that will haunt discussions today, I'm sure, is the extent to which visas are an issue in these origin markets. And if you want to know more about visas, again, this is something we're working on at ETOA, so give us your card and we will furnish you with that information. Ladies and gentlemen, you heard enough from me. We've got a lot to discuss today, so I will get off the stage. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Tom. Yeah, I'm already primed for plenty of debate about visas from all sorts of different angles, so I'm sure that will come up. Again, before we get going with the first substantive debate on Brazil, just a few brief words, I think, from Leslie Vella, who comes from the European Travel Commission. So, Leslie, if you would take the stage, and I think you're going to join our Brazil discussion afterwards, but give us your opening thought.
Well, thank you very much, and good afternoon. My name is Leslie Vella. I'm from the European Travel Commission, and for the past few years I've been chairing the Market Intelligence Group of the ETC. The ETC, which has nothing to do with the European Commission. It's an organization which brings about together 33 European NTOs with the prime objective of promoting Europe as a destination in the overseas market. So obviously the interest in the markets we'll be discussing this afternoon is very strong. We work very closely with our partners, the World Tourism Organization, European Cities Marketing and ETOA, and carry out a number of studies on these markets. And they are markets which, as Tom said, are very unique in their own separate ways, grouped together under this acronym, but as the discussions and the presentations will hopefully show over the next few 1.5 hours together, basically we will identify what trends and situations prevail in these different markets. Thank you for having me here, and hope that we have an interesting afternoon together. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie, and do take a seat here in the panel because we want your insights into the Brazil market. And at that point, with Brazil in mind, I'm going to invite up to the stage our two key panelists who are going to join Leslie, and then we're going to have an opening sort of market intelligence overview report, which I will introduce in just a second. But first, if we get our panel together, can I invite Andre Faz from Abreu Online and Maria Marote, an independent travel consultant in Brazil, to join me on the stage. Give them a warm hand, ladies and gentlemen.
We'll switch.
And do take a seat, everybody. So we've got our Brazil panel, but so we can chew over some Brazil market analysis, let me invite to the podium right now Magdalena Osmola, who has been looking at the Brazil market and I think is going to give us the fruits of her labor. So Magdalena, over to you.
Welcome everyone. Can everyone hear me? Fine? Okay. Great. My role today is really to present very quickly and hopefully briefly the results of the study that we very recently commissioned. Just to introduce myself, my name is Magdalena Osmola and I work for the European Tour Operators Association. So that's the very brief study that we put together with some facts and figures. So just to start off with some of the most important facts in terms of population and the economic growth. As you can see from the slide here, the population of Brazil is currently ranked world number 5. And of course it is important to note that it's a decreasing number, so as most of the other countries all around the world, it's also an aging population. And of course, numbers of people over 35 years are growing very rapidly. When it comes to economy, as you can see, Brazil, again, definitely a powerhouse economy. It's at the moment ranked world number 6. As you can also see, actually the trend rate growth is forecasted at around 3.5%. And I'm pretty sure that many of you know that in comparison to other powerhouse economies, it's not such a substantial growth. For example, China and other Asian economies grow at much higher percentages. However, still, as we can see, ranked number 6, so very, very important to us. I think that the most important success for Brazil in recent years has been in terms of trying to distribute income more evenly. In recent years, Brazil is working towards delivering this goal. And of course, before, it was always considered as one of the most unequal in terms of distributing this income. Okay, just to move forward to something that it might be, of course, more interesting to us, so outbound trips from Brazil. Like US, it's important to know that Brazil is a market where domestic travel still overshadows the international travel. However, as we can see from all the figures here, of course it's a large market, large outbound market, and the most important in South America, of course by far the most important, and the fastest growing. It is important to know that it's also a market that is very prone to changes, and it can have periods of boost, and it can have also periods of quite moderate growth. In terms of spend, this is, I think, even more interesting. As we can see, the international spend is quite high, and it is very safe to say that Brazilians are very keen shoppers. They enjoy shopping abroad. And also, of course, they are ranked number 12 at the moment in terms of international spend, and this is according to WTO. So again, that's very, very important to us. And moving forward, Brazilian travel to Europe, to discuss a little bit how the Brazilian market can impact our industry here in Europe. As you can see, 1/3 of Brazilian outbound trips comes to Europe, so that's quite a large share. It has a very good growth potential. However, there's been a couple of impacts lately. In the last couple of years, Europe's share shrunk definitely. This is mainly due to the increased competition from more domestic destinations, so other parts of Brazil, and also some short-haul destinations, and this is mainly, of course, Latin America, but also US, so North America. Also, as we were mentioning in the opening remarks, visas is a topic that comes back very, very often. And the recent changes in visa processes, especially in the US and Mexico, can further affect travel from Brazil. As we know, in 2012, there's been quite a lot of activities towards even visa-free travel in the future in the US. And actually, Obama's administration is really pushing that topic forward. So we might hear quite a lot about it in the next 4 years. Also, higher airfares and additional surcharges in the future can affect Brazilians traveling to Europe. And just to very quickly sum up a very general statement about what Brazilians traveling to Europe want from European businesses. First of all, family visits. What it means, as most of you know, Brazil is a nation of mainly 4th or 5th generations of immigrants. So very often their travel is connected with pursuing ancestry and family links. So that's, again, a very strong competitive advantage for Europe. Also, many Brazilians are very strongly attracted by city lights and shopping. They are eager to come to city breaks. They are eager to shop. And also music entertainment is very, very important. Also sport, which is of course football, but also any other sport. They are just keen both to participate in sport and also to watch it. So these two things. And cultural trips, we had a couple of interesting statistics from Paris, of course their favorite destination. According to Paris, most of the Brazilians are very interested in visiting museums and galleries, also interested again in shopping, perhaps not so interested in visiting theme parks, so that's not something that they would like to do. And just to sum up one more thing, in terms of booking travel, Brazilians book mainly online, so that's the first important source. Then, of course, tour operators and travel agents are still very, very important. And thirdly, booking through direct websites of accommodation providers is still lagging a little bit behind. Thank you very much, and now I'm sure you're going to hear from industry insiders, so that will be much more engaging. Thank you so much.
Well, don't be so modest, Magdalena, but thank you. The initial thought strikes me that Brazilians like to go on holiday and watch good football. They're not going to come to England, unfortunately. But anyway, that's by the by. Magdalena, thank you very much for that. I want to start actually with Maria, because Maria, you are a very experienced professional tour guide, and you work with, I believe, Brazilian tour groups in Europe. So before we get into too much discussion, we really need to hear from you, draw on your experience and tell us what works for Brazilians in Europe, what doesn't work, and how you see trends right now.
Right. I mean, what used to work for Brazilians 20 years ago, it's not necessarily working now anymore. I mean, generally, they're still very much interested in some things. For example, things related to monarchies, castles, palaces. They absolutely love it. It doesn't exist there. Cultural visits, yes, they are important, but it's a combination of all of that. 20 years ago, you had a 60-70% of a cultural visit that had to be in the packet. Today, it shifts more. There has to be some shopping time. That I find has changed a lot. But you have to have all the elements. You need to have a little bit of space for them so that they can wander around, do some shopping. They love shopping here. They feel safe, which they don't necessarily feel in all their major cities. They love the fact that public transport here actually works in most cities in Europe, and they can get easy from A to B. All those things they really like. But they want also to include some part of cultural visits, especially anything that's very, very ancient, very, very historical, they really like. So, yes, they have beautiful landscapes, for example, in Brazil, but something like Switzerland, where you have wonderful landscapes, and next to it, a 13th century church, that does it for them. They really...
Yeah, how big an advantage do the Iberian, I mean Portugal obviously, but maybe Spain as well, how big an advantage do they have because of cultural ties and similarities and linguistic, obviously in Portugal's case, linguistic ease?
A lot actually. This is one of the things they feel uncomfortable with is language. Because you see the Brazilians that are now in their late 30s, 40s, 50s, their English is not as good as the younger Brazilians. They've been able to go out, spend a year abroad and learn English, whereas people in their 30s, 40s, they're career people, they've got wonderful careers, but their English isn't that good, and or their French or any other language, so they feel quite uncomfortable language-wise. Spain, and especially Portugal, has the advantage of first historical links. There's a lot of historical links with Portugal, but the language is very, very important for them. And one of the things I always see is that when you go around with Brazilians, they're always considered like the Latin America market. Well, Latin America, 49% of those people speak Portuguese. Still, a lot of places is regarded as Spanish as a language, and that's...
Interesting. Andre, I want to bring you in, because one of the very interesting things that Magdalena told us, it was so interesting I wrote it down, is that, you know, despite everybody talking about the potential of the Brazilian market, Europe's share of outbound Brazilian travelers is actually going down. Now, what does that say about Europe's failings with the Brazilian market?
Well, first of all, good afternoon for everyone. I've been working for the last 2 years for the largest travel group in Portugal that's very well established in the Brazilian market, and we've been experiencing a growth in the beginning of the year was like
Really?
crazy, and then we've been checking right now that they slowed down the last months, but I think it's because of the domestic traveling, like Madalena said. That's one of the main markets over there, and that's why I think they are slowing down right now, but I think it's still growing. They still have a lot of potential.
Yeah, well, that's good from the point of view of your particular business, and I guess going back to Magdalena's point about linguistic ties and cultural ties, you're in a good place being Portuguese.
We are Portuguese, and we've been in the market for a long time, very well established for almost 50 years in Brazil. So.
But my strategic sort of thought for you would be, if it is indeed true that Obama is pushing to ease the visa situation for Brazilians traveling to the United States to the point where there may not even be a need for any sort of visa at all, that's going to be a huge challenge for you guys in Europe trying to build the business.
So many people want to travel into the US, and the situation is struggling because they are not well prepared to get all visas. So and there's a lot of money that they can spend out there, and that's why they're
But what I'm saying is, are you prepared for a time which may not be so far away where Brazilians don't need visas for the US, and therefore some of the travelers that are put off the US at the moment because of the visa requirement will therefore perhaps be more enthusiastic about the US, and it may affect your business and other businesses trying to attract Brazilians in Europe?
Yeah, it may affect, but US has been forever one of the main destinations for Brazilians, right? Because Brazilians, as a Brazilian, we have a lot of influence from North America. So I think what's going to change is just maybe, I think the Brazilians, they see US and Europe as totally different worlds.
Right.
Right? Like Madalena said, Brazilians, they don't come to Europe to go to the theme parks. They go to US to go to Disneyland, for example.
Right.
So
Tom, you wanted to get in.
I would just stress that that Europe is losing market share in Brazil is not a unique thing. Europe is losing market share in most markets. There are two reasons for this. One is the sort of old British industry argument, which is we're having competition for the first time, and we're not used to that. But the second argument is that Europe is uniquely regulated and uniquely taxed as a destination from these origin markets. And what we sell in these destination markets is very much the European travel industry. And that carries with it complications. So we're losing market share in Brazil, but this is not unusual.
Sure, but on that issue of the tax and regulation regime, you know, if you think about it from the Brazilian consumer's point of view, how prohibitive, or at least how difficult is it to contemplate, you know, the airfare cost of coming to you? I mean, how expensive is it right now for a Brazilian to fly into Madrid, Paris, or London? And when you consider all of the passenger duties and taxes that we seem to be finding ways of adding on to our ticket prices right now, how difficult is that situation becoming?
Well, I think the Brazilians, the taxes and regulations, they are not a big issue right now. But the big issue, the language, like Maria said, is it's very important, and the visa and for the Americans, it's not going to slow down the European market. I think Brazilians, from my point of view, I think the European destinations, they need to show something else to Brazilian people, because they only know like Paris, London, Rome, and there's a lot of things to show. And like Tom said, it's slowing down. Now they have competition, and maybe it's time to show something else to Brazilian.
Yeah.
Because they don't know, they only know that the main capitals come on there.
I'm entitled to ask dumb questions. That's my job in these panels. So I'm going to ask you a really dumb question. The European English, maybe cliche view of a Brazilian is that, of course, they love things like samba and football and all that. But also, you sort of have a cliched image that they love warm weather. So is Northern Europe, has Northern Europe got a particular problem with Brazilians because they think, God, it's cold, grey and rainy?
No, not really. The Brazilians, they like to come to Europe to feel the cold. It looks insane, but it's a reality.
Yeah, come on, Maria, what do you think?
They're actually disappointed. When they come in winter, they're disappointed when it doesn't snow.
Yeah.
It is like, are we going to see some snow? Depends. Yeah, they actually expect it.
They're expecting.
They know when, they're very good at that, knowing when they're traveling. So they know that September is going to be a month where they're going to be not having it, but they like to come in January.
Really?
January is a big month for Brazilians because they've got school holidays. And it's a big month because they expect to come.
Well, that's very interesting.
And see snow.
Yeah. I mean, that's fascinating. And do you think tour operators are aware of that? You know, for example, that January, Christmas and January are great times to attract Brazilian tour groups and packages.
Yes, I think the other point which is lying behind this, and it's probably worth reiterating, is, as we saw in the demographics, that the core market that we're selling to in Brazil is this burgeoning middle class, which is also middle-aged.
Right.
And the middle-aged people need to have things in Portuguese. This is the thing to stress.
Yeah, that's very important.
But realistically, they're not, you know, they're not going to get things in Portuguese. You know, we usually in most big European cities, you know, in tourist areas, you will find that French is there and maybe German, and increasingly you might find Mandarin or Russian. But do you really think we're going to have such a long list of language options that Portuguese is going to be there?
But Stephen, you're assuming what you're doing is you're citing examples of destinations adapting to the market. You're saying we're increasingly having Mandarin, we're increasingly having
I'm saying
Russian.
there is a limit. I mean, obviously...
And if we're wanting to attract these people, we have to treat them as customers, alas.
You have Maria speaking Portuguese to them.
Yes, I learned it.
As a guide.
but increasingly, I mean, there's places in London where you've got, you even have, and this is like Brazilian Portuguese or Portuguese from Portugal headsets so that people can follow it. Oh, yes.
How different, again, forgive my massive ignorance, but how different is Portuguese from Brazilian Portuguese?
They can understand each other perfectly, but I mean, there's some places they've been so specific as to do that. I mean...
Right. Okay. Well,
It's like American English, and yeah.
No, I don't understand a word of American. So.
No, you don't.
Okay. Brazil, I want to tap into any Brazil knowledge or thoughts or insights or questions from anybody who works with the Brazilian market, wants to work with it, has any knowledge of it. Anybody, do feel free to chip in as we continue our discussion. Is anybody wanting to contribute right now? I always find at the beginning of these debates that there's a lot of shyness, and then suddenly it melts away and everybody's pitching in. But madam, have you've got a point you want to make? Go on. Hang on, we'll just wait. If you would, just tell us who you are and give us your point into the microphone.
Hi, good afternoon. Juliana Muscenti, I'm a travel writer. I have had the opportunity to live in Brazil, in Florianopolis.
Oh, that's a nice place.
And I'm trying to live now in Portugal, in South Portugal, the beautiful region of Algarve. And now that you are mentioning it, I think that's the door to bring Brazilians to Europe. Portugal has all the conditions in leisure, in hospitality, in cultural offer, and the language to bring Brazilians through. It's a different face of Europe as well, and it's more affordable than most of the destinations. And there are not only the traditional ways of getting there through Lisbon, for example. Now we have Faro with direct flights connect to London actually. So it could be considered to create packages going to South Portugal and then for some snow in the Nordic countries. To answer your question, the difference between Brazilian and Portuguese is open and closed vowels. So you just need to modulate a little bit more when you talk to
language lessons can begin after this session, but thank you for that. Interesting point about flight connections. and where they are right now, if they're good enough, and where you see the potential for adding new connections between Brazil and Europe?
As I said before, I think by living the last 8 years in Portugal, living in Lisbon, and I see the tourism boards, they don't promote other destinations. Just show like Lisbon.
Right.
And in Portugal, you have so many beautiful things to see, and people don't know it. And I believe that it happens the same in other European countries. I don't know if my colleagues here agree with me. And
well, Tom, you've got to get your act together. You know.
Yeah, no. If I'm responsible, then I have to get a lot of things together. You're right. Yeah.
I'll tell you what, and again, this may sound ridiculous, but is there not a bit of a problem over the next few years with attracting Brazilian tourists, in that Brazil's got so much going on internally, you know, from Olympics to World Cups to all of the stuff that will go with that, uncovering, you know, Brazil for an international audience. Brazilians may frankly look at what's going on in their own country and think, well, you know, why should I go to austerity-strapped Europe when there's so much going on in my country and my continent? Go on.
Yeah, I don't know, because most of those competitions are when they're not really traveling. I mean, most of Brazilians come April, May, September, October.
Right.
There won't be any football going on then. I mean, not that type of football.
Right. But there is a buzz about Brazil at the
Yeah.
moment. And do you think Brazilians feel that too, and are getting more excited about discovering their own vast country, never mind coming to Europe?
I still think they want the Europe element.
Yeah.
they give a lot of importance to go abroad. Brazilians, they like to, well, show up, show off. You know, to say, to say to their friends, that, I've been to Madrid, Rome, London. They like that. So it's a cultural thing.
But what about, you know, countries differ in the priority they put on travel. You know, we're talking about this growing Brazilian middle class with more spending power, and that's obviously great. But in some countries, spending power would be applied to acquiring, you know, more and better consumer goods, you know, better gadgets, better TVs, a bigger house. They would look to spend to further their sort of material life at home. And travel might be quite a long way down the list of priorities. I mean, in Brazil, is travel experience quite high up the list of priorities?
Yeah, I think the travel is a big priority for Brazilians. We have seen the last 10 years a lot of people moving from class D to class C when they start buying things like TV, fridge, cars, but now we have more people in the middle class and they have those things and they're traveling more. So that's why I think there are a lot of potential for Brazilian market.
I remember when there was like years ago when there was so much inflation, about 95, 94. Money they had in the bank was worthless, like in 3 weeks' time. So a lot of Brazilians came over because they thought, well, I'd rather get something out of it. I'll travel because I've paid for my trip and, you know, I've paid for it now. It's not going to change the price. And at least I invested in, and they see it as an investment travel as well.
Okay, well, you two, you know, looking at the Brazilian market and wanting to see it expand for your own sort of personal and business reasons, you've got a representative of the European tour operators here. You also got the European Travel Commission here. What's your message to people who take an overview of how Europe presents itself? What's your fundamental message to these organizations about how Europe what it needs to do to maximize its presence and its potential in Brazil?
Well, for Brazilian market, I see that many companies that they want to go for Brazilian market, but they don't know how to go there. And I think they need to be aware of some barriers that they can find then, like the culture, like Brazilians, they are not like European people. They are not so formal. The way of doing business. So you need to be aware of this point.
You need to chill out a bit more.
Yeah, exactly.
Tom, when you're next in Brazil selling Europe, you've got to take your tie off, get your sandals on, your shorts.
Yeah, we don't use tie for the travel industry. Yeah. And for example, they don't trust so easily in people. So that's you need to be aware of this. The language,
Yeah.
It's very important if you don't speak Portuguese. So not so many Brazilians, they speak English, right? Maybe they speak Spanish.
I was going to say, it's the second language, Spanish, not
It'll be more
English.
Spanish than English, yeah. Even though we know that the English language is very important, but because of our neighbors.
Your neighbors, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I think that when we go to Brazil, another thing to be aware is how big is the country, and there are a lot of differences that you can see. And if you go to São Paulo, or if you go to Recife, there's a big difference. We know that most of the travel business is in São Paulo and Rio, but there are a lot of business out of these two main cities. And what else I can say? Payments issues. You need to understand how it works, because it's different. Like Brazilian, we are used to pay things in 10 installments, for example, 10 times. So and it's hard to make understand how can we do this, and who could we do this for us in the Brazilian market.
Sure,
So
but interesting, Brazilians are very much used to paying for holidays, vacations on the internet. I mean, and buying.
Yeah,
on
but
the internet.
even in internet, you can pay in 10 installments.
Can you?
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. It's different the way it works. So you
Right.
need to be aware of that, and legal things like how to open a company, and it's not so easy to open a company. And one of the most important things I think is to find qualified professionals, good professionals in Brazil to help you to be there. Because in Brazil we see that they have a lot of potential, but they don't have a qualified professional to develop the market. So,
right. All right. Well, those are good thoughts. Maria, any more to add to that list?
Well, yeah, basically all that. And also, really, to not take Brazil as part of, I mean, they're not Argentinians, they're not Chileans, they are Brazilians. And yes, it is South America geographically, but they're completely different. A lot of packages are sold, you say the Latin American market, and you include Brazil, you have to really do. Argentinians are far more interested in only cultural bits than Brazilians. It has to be two different. It's not one market. Yeah. It's one geographical area, but it's not one market.
So if you think you can get away with a sort of generic South America operation, you're kidding yourself.
I mean, it is happening, and it's still, I mean, a lot of the tours are still even shared between them, but it just isn't working anymore. I don't think, you can feel it. You can feel people want different things. And
right, that's interesting.
The culture is different.
Yeah, all right, we're almost out of time, but we don't want to leave Brazil without anybody who's got a thought or a question about Brazil having the chance to air it. So stick a hand in the air. Madam, you've got your hand up. Let's get a microphone to you.
Good afternoon, Suzanne. I'm a student in France in tourism. So how do they travel in Europe? Do they visit many countries, or do they just stay in a country like France or?
Yeah, good question. I should have asked it myself, but anyway, thank you for asking.
They like to visit as many countries as they can. Like I said, they take pictures and then go back to Brazil and tell their friends, oh, I've been in Lisbon, Madrid, Paris,
Really?
London, Rome.
So
in 1 week.
our cliche of the typical American tourist is a little bit like that. You know, you say you do Europe in a week, and that means you do Paris, you do London, you do Rome, you do Venice. They try and pack in a lot. Yeah?
as much as possible.
As much as possible.
Maybe it's not the best way to know Europe, but...
Well,
but in this, they are not unique.
no, they are not. But I just wonder, I mean, it's kind of expensive.
No.
No?
It's less expensive when you do it like this. Otherwise, they would have to come back to Portugal.
I see what you mean.
You know?
Right. Okay. Yeah. So it's very much a wham bam, thank you ma'am sort of doing Europe. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, no,
I mean, I don't mean to imply that anything else is going on, but
it's not that bad. I mean, 3 days in London. You then decide to come. It's like a snapshot, and you then decide to come back to London because you loved it so much, or never to go back. I mean,
right. Okay. There's a couple of questions at the back. Yeah, sir.
A question about the middle class, the growing and the emerging middle class in Brazil. How fast is it growing? Percentages, if you can share it with us. You've mentioned also the cultural traveling that they like. Being an Egyptian, I'd like to know if you can share their perception of ancient cultures, like in Egypt, in the Middle East, generally speaking. Is this one of the destinations they think about, or is it just the culture of Europe? Thank you.
Yeah, good. Who would like to take that on? First of all, how quickly and to what size is the emerging middle class growing? And then are Brazilians going to be interested in wonderful destinations like Egypt with their own history?
Well, the first question I wouldn't...
I'm afraid I will confess to being ignorant of the answer to the first
Magdalena?
question. Magdalena's there, but she's shaking her head very carefully.
Can you shout, Magdalena? How, I mean... Sir, did you hear that? I'm afraid you've got to go to the website afterwards. I'm sorry about that. But anyway, I'm actually, having just come back from Cairo myself, I am interested to know whether a destination like Cairo or Luxor or, you know, the antiquities of Egypt, would that be something that would interest Brazilians?
For now, I don't think it's the most important destinations that Brazilians are looking for. But it's something that is missing in Brazil, that destination, they need to go there and they need to show what you can offer. Otherwise, it's, they're still thinking about...
there's a challenge. So you can break that market for the first time. You can be the Egyptian who gets Brazilians into Brazil, into Egypt. Fantastic.
I think the answer is also col tempo. I mean, with time, these things will evolve.
Yeah.
Don't forget that South America has its own ancient civilizations that are there to be explored. I think the real news about Brazil, in the context of this discussion, is that they get Europe. They are part of a wider European diaspora in a way in which some of these other powerhouse economies that we're looking at see themselves as being very, very different.
Yeah. Okay, I think there was another hand up. Was there over there? Yeah. Oh, there's several. Goodness. Right, we're going to have to be snappy because I've got timekeeping issues. So be as quick as you can.
Zacharias Ioannidis from Cyprus Hotel Association. I see a great opportunity here because there seems to be the seasonality is complementing between Brazil and Europe. There was mentioned that January, February, it's holiday season for breaks, so it's opportunity for traveling to Europe, and also September, October. So these are, from what it seems, a great opportunity for us in Europe, how to work together with the travel professionals of Brazil, of exchanging traffic and travel flows between Europe and Brazil, which will complement the occupancies of hotels in the two areas. So I don't know the views of the panel of how best we can find the professionals of the two areas working together in developing such reciprocal packages.
Right.
I think in the European Union institutions and in HOTREC, in which we participate, there is some thought that is developing of switching traffic flows between Brazil and Europe.
Right. Are experts exploiting all these sort of...
there is an initiative led by the European Commission to try and promote low-season tourism from Brazil into Europe. It's certainly on paper and in theory seems a brilliant idea. How far existing market patterns already answer these requirements is an open question as ever. I mean, if low-season availability is there, it tends to be effectively priced and priced to attract visitors. But nevertheless, there is an initiative in this area. So let's see. The European Commission is putting money into promoting low-season tourism from Brazil. So we'll see if that bears fruit.
Okay, time for one more, and then we'll have to move on, I'm afraid. But Madam, you've been very patient. Yeah, there you go.
I'm from Brazil, and I used to work for STB, Student Travel Bureau, for 7 years. And you asked about language destinations. And for the last few years, Canada was one of the first destinations because of the price.
Right.
So one Canada dollar, it was less than 2 reais. And to go to US, it was average 2 reais. Now to come to UK, we have the facility for do not need visa. So it became our second destination. UK.
But UK is very expensive, no?
It's still even more expensive. Brazilians prefer to come to England because they don't need visa. So
Right.
I really think that it could be a problem for Europe, especially for UK, when the United States do not asking visa.
Exactly. Well, that's exactly what I was saying, and you lot were saying, "Oh no, don't worry about it." But you should worry about it.
And for young people, we work with young people in Brazil, and they usually, yes, they look for Egypt, and they look for Turkey, they look for,
new
Asia,
destinations,
and people who travel a lot in Brazil, for the first time they prefer US to do shopping, especially to do shopping, or go to New York. Who wants to know more about US, go to California and Florida. And so, I think those are the most, the biggest destinations.
That's very interesting. And the message, I think, very important and powerful message from what you've just said is that all of you, with your different interests in Brazil, Europe, travel, shouldn't be complacent.
But people who came to Europe, they probably went to US, and so they want cultural travel.
Right.
They are not looking for shopping in Europe. Yeah, maybe you agree with me. And they really want to travel, in more countries as they can in the first trip. But then they choose a country that they like more and come stay more time.
Yeah.
So this is the way Brazilian works,
Well, I thank you for that. That's really helpful. And I mean, it fits with some of what you were saying, but don't rest on your laurels. You're looking quite affronted, Tom.
Oh, no, my laurels are never very comfortable, so
All right. Well, listen, thank you so much for that contribution, because it gave us a great insight into, where Brazil is at and how it views all of the different travel destinations. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very busy schedule today because we've got so many different countries and markets to address. So I'm going to have to, just because of the time pressure, say goodbye to Brazil and thank you very much to a terrific panel. Thank you, panel, very much indeed. And I'll tell you what, there's going to be literally no more than a 3-minute break now while we get the new panelists microphoned up. And so if you need to stretch your legs, whatever, 3 minutes, but we'd love you to come back because next we're dealing with India. India next.